This is my June wrap-up and July to be read. In June I read Goliath by Scott Westerfeld, The Moon and More by Sarah Dessen, Kilmeny of the Orchard by Ellen Montgomery, and Lady Almina and the Real Downton Abbey, The Lost Legacy of Highclere Castle. I liked all of the books okay. None of them really stood out in my mind, but I wanted to talk a little bit about each of them. Goliath is the third in the Leviathan series by Scott Westerfeld, and I really enjoyed the first two books, so I was really excited to get into Goliath. I'm not normally a steampunk person, but I'd heard really good things about the series. And I really loved the Ugly series, except for extras, because, yeah. My favorite thing about the book was the illustrations. The illustrations were beautiful, and it helped me really think about the imagery a lot more. Normally that's not what I focus on when I read, but having the pictures right there in front of me really helped that. And even though the book looks long, the pictures just break up the story in a way that makes you want to continue reading. Goliath is about Darren and Alec and their continuing adventures during the war. Some aboard Leviathan, some not. The book really highlights the social class distinctions of Darren and Alec. Alec is used a lot as a pawn politically for things, and sometimes he even uses himself as a pawn, much to the chagrin of the people around him. And Alec's also pretty young, so he's still trying to figure out how things work and isn't always making the best decisions. And then there's the relationship between Darren and Alec, which I've always really liked and continue to like in Goliath. So overall, Goliath is a pretty great book, but I preferred the first two books in the series. I listened to the audiobook of Kilmeny of the Orchard. Like I said in my Getting to Know Me video, I really like Anne of Green Gables, and I've been trying to read Ellen Montgomery's other works. One of the interesting things to me about Kilmeny of the Orchard is that the protagonist is a male, whereas all of the other Ellen Montgomery books I've read, the protagonist is female, and even the title suggests that the book will be about Kilmeny, and in reality she is the love interest. So Kilmeny of the Orchard, the main protagonist is named Eric. He's a 24-year-old who comes to Prince Edward Island as a substitute teacher. He's originally supposed to be there only 2 months, and then he meets Kilmeny and falls in love with her. The thing about Kilmeny is that she's mute, and because she's mute, she's been kept away from society and thinks herself unworthy of Eric's love. So overall, Kilmeny of the Orchard is a really great read, and it was really fast, but I probably won't go back and reread it like I do the Anne of Green Gables series. I'm a really big Sarah Dessen fan, so when I heard she was coming out with a new book, I was really excited. The Moon and More is about a girl named Emmeline, who's a local at the beach town of Colby. Dessen uses Colby a lot in her stories, but usually the main character is coming to Colby to have a summer adventure of some sort, and this is the first book she's had where the main character is from Colby. Emmeline does all sorts of odd jobs for the company. She helps check people in, she makes sure the maids are doing a good job, she gives people their VIP baskets. And it's while working for the company that she meets this boy, Theo. Theo is working with a filmmaker doing a documentary on a local artist. Theo's kind of driven to a fault. He just wants to be the best. He wants Emmeline to be her best, too. His perception of the artist Clyde Conaway's work is a lot more complicated than even Clyde thinks about it. At one point he's like, "Oh, you're using this grass. This grass must be a symbol of this." And Clyde's like, "This grass is just everywhere. That's why I use it." Emmeline's estranged father also comes for the summer after his aunt dies. Emmeline's father pushed her to go to Columbia because she wanted to go to Columbia and said he would pay for things, but then realized he couldn't and went back on his word. And so she's really pissed off at him about that. Most things in the book are fairly predictable. It was an enjoyable and fast summer read, and I just finished Lady Almina and the Real Downton Abbey, The Lost Legacy of Highclere Castle. This book was a gift to my mother, and she read it first and liked it, so I decided I'd give it a try since we both like Downton Abbey. It's written by the current lady of Highclere Castle, so I took everything with a grain of salt because obviously she's going to have a bias towards the aristocracy. The one thing that I really got bogged down in was the hierarchy and the family tree of everybody. It was really hard to keep track of people by their title when their title would change when their father died. The 5th Earl, who marries Almina, was referred to as Porchy as a child because he's Lord Porchester. And then, when he has a child, his child is called Porchy because he's going to be the next Lord Porchester. And that got really confusing for me. Almina comes to Highclere when she's 19 years old and immediately is thrust into preparing a party for guests that include the Prince of Wales. Almina likes to be extravagant with her money and enjoys throwing lavish parties. Almina and her husband lead really interesting lives. She starts a war hospital in Highclere and then moves it to London, and her husband was part of the team who discovered King Tut's tomb. The reason I don't have the book with me is because I already lent it to my grandpa, so I liked it enough to, lend it off to someone else. It's a solid 4 stars, but obviously it's not going to be as interesting as a drama like Downton Abbey, so you shouldn't be looking for that when you pick up this book. For July, I'm going to read The Speaker for the Dead by Orson Scott Card, which is the sequel to Ender's Game. I really liked Ender's Game when I read it, so I'm really looking forward to continuing the series. At the end of Ender's Game, Ender becomes the Speaker for the Dead. I don't know too much about this book, but it says on the back cover that a new alien race is discovered, and they have to decide whether or not to proceed the same way as they did during the Bugger War. I also want to read Zubiquity. It's a book about the correlation of animal diseases and human diseases. I've read the first couple pages of this, and they talk about how veterinarians and doctors don't often collaborate on work. There are animal diseases and human diseases that have the same symptoms but are named different things because animal doctors do not collaborate with human doctors. And finally, I want to finish The Diviners. I'm about that much through with it. It's been hard for me to start, but I really want to finish it. It's starting to pick up. It's about a girl named Evie who has a power to read objects that other people have touched, and she gets in trouble for that at a party and has to leave to go to Manhattan to live with her uncle. Her uncle runs an occult museum, and she's really worried that he's going to find out her secret. The book switches points of view, so that's kind of interesting, but it mostly focuses on Evie. So that's what I read in June and what I hope to read in July. I usually read more than 3 books, but I have a really hard time pinning myself down to decide which books I want to read. We'll see if I stick to it. July is also Camp NaNoWriMo, so I'm hoping to write some during the month of July, but I'm already far lower than the goal I had set for myself, so we'll see how that works out. See you next time.